Well, hello, mamas. Jessica Coulter here. We are talking about cramming for finals part 3. All right. We are talking about specifically the study strategies your teen needs to use during that cram session. This is going to rely on those other things we talked about earlier this week. Your teen having the right expectations, realizing the grade that's going to come after cram session most likely, very good chance, not going to be as good as if your teen had actually had the time, made the time to study. And also really depends on that prep work, that second thing we talked about yesterday. If your teen doesn't know the format of the final, doesn't know the material on the final, this cram session is not going to go very well. So let me know. Have you watched videos 1 and 2, part 1 and 2? Let me know down below because I want you to stick around with me here on Facebook, on YouTube if you're live with me, but I also want you to catch those other videos. So let me know. Now, I do also want to tell you that if you want some help and your teen needs some help with scheduling and figuring out the Cram session and how to study, that's what the link in the bio is for, to schedule a talk with me, a talk with Jessie. All right, so answer the question about if you've watched other videos, and then let's talk about today. Let's talk about this actual cram session, what those study strategies need to be. All right, so like I said, the expectations, a grade, not going to be as great. Now, when it comes to the session itself, the study techniques, the study strategies, your teen needs to realize he's not studying for a grade, and he's not necessarily studying to learn. I mean, as a study tutor, study skills tutor, I want your teen to love learning. I want your teen to see the value and want to learn as much in every class. But if we're cramming, the goal here for your teen is based on that prep work, he knows what to focus on. All right, if your teen's teacher said it's going to be cumulative, okay, hopefully your teen will push a little bit more. Well, do you mean that's going to be like 50%, before the break, like spring break, and 50% after? Do you mean that chapter 3 that we only spent a day on won't be on there? Like your teen needs to have done that prep work and really know, what am I studying? Okay, because that's the first part of this cram session, is once your teen knows what he needs to study and he's gathered all his materials, all the study guides, all the textbooks, all the notes, because your teen's got to have those, because that's part of the reason I tutor study skills. So if your teen doesn't have notes, doesn't know how to read usefully, like how to annotate and how to get information from those resources, we should talk. But definitely your teen needs to focus on whatever the teacher said is important. Okay, now some teachers are going to be like, it's just cumulative, or, oh, it'll be easy. Okay, your teen needs to just go for the overarching ideas here. Okay, because when your teen is cramming, your teen not going to learn all those little details. So those test taking strategies we're going to talk about later this week, those are super important, because whenever your teen takes a test, like a final, especially multiple choice, especially multiple answer, especially matching, your teen needs to know, okay, there's a difference between the strategies I can use and the content that I know. Because when your teen's cramming, all we're doing is trying to get your teen to get as many points as possible by focusing on the important stuff. Okay, if your teen has a vague notion of something, like that's actually going to stick in his head after cramming, that vague notion can then help your teen on the final. But if your teen sees a question on the test and was like, I don't remember reading that, I don't remember talking about that in class, your teen is going to miss out on that question. Hopefully can make a wild guess, but your teen really needs to have some vague notion, kind of overarching generalizations of as much as possible to make a cram session worth it. Okay, now I have some more thoughts I want to share with you here, some more ideas on what your teen needs to do when actually studying. Before I do, just know that your teen, if he's got like a test tomorrow, maybe even 2 days from now, if your teen's plan is, okay, I have to study last minute, but it's not really cramming because I got lots of time, we do not want your teen sitting down for hours at a time. We do not want your college student staying up till 4 in the morning and the finals at 2. We do not want late nights. We do not want hours and hours and hours back to back to back to back of studying. That is not effective. It's not going to help if your teen's cramming. It's not going to help if your teen's just studying. We need your teen to use little chunks of time. We're going to talk about them more in a second. So before we move into the final part of the video, before we talk about this kind of last study strategy your teen needs to use when cramming, if we haven't met yet, I'm Jessica Coulter, CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring and Study with Jessie. I help teens, so including college students, including tweens in middle school, love to learn through study skills. So I'd love to have you as a follower of my Facebook business page where we're live right now, and a subscriber of my YouTube channel where we're also live. And I want you to learn what you need to know and what you want to know about helping your team love to learn through study skills. All right. So hopefully that gives you a little introduction, lets you know you're in the right place. And mamas, I'm here to help. So definitely, if you got questions, I hope you're dropping them as we go. And if I don't see them, I'm so sorry, but we'll get to them in the future in another video, I promise. All right. Last strategy here, and if you've been around here for a while, you'll know that learning styles make a big difference when studying. Now, I just told you that we don't want your teen study for hours at a time, okay? And that's true no matter if your teen's visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. But what we also need to remember is that those tools your teen's going to use when studying, the location like we mentioned the other day, whether it's with somebody or by himself, those all go into learning style and personal preferences. Now, your teen who's very visual needs colors, needs drawings, needs to do lots of reading. Okay, so if your teen's cramming, your visual learner is going to get the most out of flipping through notes that are annotated, that are highlighted, that are something for your teen to read. If your teen's auditory, your teen needs to do as much listening as possible. So if that's listening to audiobooks, if that's reading his notes out loud to himself, if that's going back and looking at the lectures, hopefully the teacher was nice enough to allow recordings in class or provided recordings. Your kinesthetic learner needs to be up and moving as much as possible, needs to be hands-on as possible. So let's give you something as simple as that your teen's walking around the house or walking in place while studying. This can mean that your teen needs to go outside, do some kind of activity while studying. It could be answer a question, shoot a hoop. It could be that your teen does 10 problems and then gets to, do 10 jumping jacks. I mean, there's so many options here. And remember, we want your teen to study small chunks, okay? My recommendation, max of an hour, okay? And that really depends on what the subject is, what your teen's grade level is, what your teen's interest, understanding. It also depends on how much are we cramming, all right? There's a big difference between, there's 3 chapters on the test and there's an entire textbook of 1,000 pages, okay? Depends on where your teen's at. Is your teen a med student? Is your teen a 7th grader? Is your child getting ready to take some really big, important tests to get into grad school? I mean, there's so many different finals, so many different tests. And I got to tell you, study strategies apply to all of them, but cramming is different levels of cramming. So the point I'm trying to make is an hour is the absolute max. The tougher the test, the less interested your child. Maybe the more we're trying to cram, definitely consider something closer to 20, 30 minutes, okay? And your teen doesn't have to stay on math for 2 hours, even if it's in chunks. Your teen can go math to English to science, okay? And there's science that supports our teens. It's called kind of interleaving. So you do this, then you do that, and you do this. Because the idea here is we can literally study so much we forget. If you've never done that, mamas, consider yourselves lucky, because my magic number was 12 hours per test. And there were times, and I learned this the hard way, that 12 hours was the magic number for me, because there were times I've taken a test before and I studied so much that I knew it all the night before. I knew it that morning. And then literally it's whoa, what is this? What's this thing that I'm reading here on the final? Okay. Or on the test. Thankfully it didn't happen on final, but definitely on a test. So definitely chunks of time, learning style, where to study, how to study, the tools to use. And most importantly, remember, mamas, I know you want good things for your teens. I know you want them to pass. I know you want them to get as good grades as they can. But remember, if your teen's cramming for a final, we're going for most points, best grade possible, with the total realization. Probably not going to be an amazing grade, or at least not as good a grade as could have happened if your teen had better time management skills. So definitely, I want to talk to you, mamas. I want to talk to your teens, your college students, and I want them to know, okay, what can I do to study? So if you've got questions about study skills, You want to know what are the study skills that your teen is missing so that there's no more cram sessions in the future. Schedule a talk with Jessie. So thanks for watching. Have a good night. And I can't wait to see you and your teen on a Zoom call very, very soon at a talk with Jessie. So go to the link in the description, click on that, choose a day and a time, and we'll get it figured out. Thanks so much. See you soon for another video about cram sessions.